Have you ever felt like the universe was silently pulling you away from everything you once knew? As if the people around you, the opportunities that once felt right, and the paths that used to make sense, were suddenly collapsing before your eyes? It feels harsh, almost cruel, as if life itself was conspiring against you. But what if I told you this feeling isn't a punishment? What if it's a silent invitation to something far greater? Carl Gustav Jung, one of the greatest minds to explore the human psyche, described this as the call to individuation, the journey to become who you truly are. Yet most people don't recognize this calling, because the moment solitude arrives, fear creeps in. And that's when most give up. The silence that could become a sacred space for self-discovery turns into a heavy burden. We live in a world where being busy is seen as being important, where a packed schedule gives us the illusion of progress, of connection, of control. But what if all this busyness is just a distraction? What if the universe is desperately trying to show you something, something you've been avoiding for far too long? The loneliness you feel, it's not a mistake. It's not misfortune. It's an intentional pause, a rare opportunity to look inward. But facing that inner emptiness can be terrifying. It forces you to confront truths you've been running from your entire life. To admit that, maybe, you're not really living your life. That the road you've been walking may have been paved by others' expectations, not your own desires. How many times have you filled your days with meaningless obligations just to avoid silence? How often have you reached for your phone just to escape that subtle, aching feeling of being alone? We are always running. But what are we really running from? Jung believed that individuation, the integration of all the parts of who we are, is the central goal of human life. Not just achieving things, not just learning more, but accepting and uniting even the parts we hide or deny. This journey, it isn't linear, and it certainly isn't easy. It asks you to sit with your thoughts, to look directly at your fears, your failures, and even your deepest desires. That's why, at certain moments, life slows us down. Solitude arrives, not as a punishment, but as a gift in disguise. And yet, so many of us resist. Which leads to the deeper question: why are we so afraid to be alone? The answer lies in our conditioning. From childhood, we're taught that being surrounded by people equals love. That constant activity is a sign of success. But no one teaches us how to sit with ourselves, how to truly listen to our thoughts, how to stay without trying to escape. So when the universe isolates us, our first instinct is to fight it. We cling to relationships that no longer fulfill us, jobs that leave us empty, and distractions that only mask the real issue. But if you stop, even for a moment, and breathe, if you dare to look at your life with different eyes, you'll begin to see something deeper is happening. The universe isn't punishing you. It's inviting you to rediscover yourself, to remember who you are when everything else falls away. Solitude has the power to transform, if you let it. Throughout history, the greatest minds sought solitude for inner growth. Nikola Tesla used isolation to visualize his inventions before ever putting pen to paper. Carl Jung built his stone tower in Bollingen, a place where he withdrew from the world to study the soul and develop his most radical theories. What if the loneliness you feel right now is the beginning of something extraordinary? What if? This is the first step to becoming your most authentic self. Subscribe to Psychology of Happiness. For weekly insights that awaken your mind, heal your heart, and guide you toward lasting inner peace. Because true happiness begins within. Imagine being alone in a quiet room. No notifications, no calls, no distractions, just you and your thoughts. What seems like a simple moment for some becomes unbearable for others. As the noise of the world fades, we are left face to face with our raw, unfiltered self. No roles, no performances, just the truth. And for many, that truth is terrifying. We live in a world where busyness is mistaken for importance. We are conditioned to believe that loneliness is a problem to be fixed, not an experience to be explored. From a young age, we're taught that being surrounded by people validates our worth, that constant activity is a sign of success. But no one teaches us how to sit in silence, how to be alone without running away from ourselves. So when the universe nudges us into isolation, our instinct is to resist. We panic. We grasp at relationships that no longer serve us, cling to careers that drain our spirit, distract ourselves with mindless entertainment. But what if, just for a moment, you paused? What if you allowed yourself to breathe, to see this chapter of life from a different lens? What if this isn't punishment, but preparation? The universe, contrary to our fear, isn't trying to break you down. It's inviting you to uncover who you are when everything else fades away. And that revelation begins in silence. Throughout history, great minds have sought solitude to fuel transformation. Nikola Tesla spent hours in reflective solitude, visualizing his inventions before ever touching paper. Carl Jung built a stone tower where he retreated from the world to dive deep into his psyche and give birth to his most profound ideas. What if your current loneliness isn't a dead end, but the first step toward becoming the most authentic version of yourself? One who doesn't need validation to feel whole. This journey isn't easy. It requires immense courage to confront the parts of yourself you've buried, your fears, your regrets, your deepest desires. But within that confrontation lies the greatest growth. You see, loneliness can be a sacred portal, a rare opportunity to step beyond the noise and meet the real you. Yet, if misunderstood, it becomes a trap, one that breeds despair, victimhood, and the illusion that you've been forgotten. But what if instead you chose to see it as rebirth? Loneliness isn't the end. It's a new beginning, a blank page, a call to rebuild your life aligned with who you truly are, not who the world told you to be. So before you move on, ask yourself, what is the universe trying to show you right now? Is there a voice inside that you've been silencing? A truth you've avoided? A calling you've ignored? In the next chapter, we'll journey even deeper, exploring what it truly means to face yourself, and to finally listen to the messages that solitude reveals. Have you ever noticed how, when you're alone, certain thoughts begin to surface? Those uncomfortable truths buried beneath the noise of everyday life? The fears, the regrets, the questions you avoid during the rush of daily routine. You distract yourself with scrolling, talking, working, but in silence. They return. Carl Jung called this hidden part of the psyche the shadow, the side of us that contains everything we've denied, suppressed, or feared to face. Unspoken pain, forgotten trauma, unrealized potential. And in the stillness of solitude, this shadow becomes louder. There's nothing left to drown it out. No excuses, no distractions, just the raw reflection of who you are. And yet, what if that isn't something to fear? What if this darkness isn't here to destroy you, but to teach you? Instead of fighting it, What if you sat with it, observed it, understood it? What if your fears were maps, leading you back to yourself? What if your anxiety was a signal, not of weakness, but of something within you that wants to be seen? Imagine your shadow as a locked room in the house of your mind. The longer you avoid it, the more intimidating it becomes. But the moment you open the door and let in the light, you begin to see what's really inside. Repressed anger transforms into passion. Fear reveals hidden courage. The dreams you've cast aside begin to speak again. Jung believed the shadow is not our enemy. It is our treasure chest, a container of raw, unshaped truth that, once integrated, becomes the foundation for a more whole and empowered life. But most people run. Instead of facing their pain, they project it onto others. They criticize, blame, and judge, mirroring back the very things they refuse to acknowledge in themselves. You've seen it, haven't you? The one who harshly condemns others often carries that same trait within. We all do this, in subtle or loud ways. But here's the question. Are you ready to stop projecting and start integrating? There's a story of an artist. To the world, he was brilliant. But inside, he was tormented. He chased distraction, parties, noise, anything to escape the silence. Until one day, isolation forced him to sit with his demons. And in that silence, he painted his truth. His pain became his masterpiece. Now ask yourself, what if the very thing you've been avoiding is the key to your freedom? The shadow doesn't vanish when ignored. It waits. And the longer it waits, the more it leaks out, in anger, anxiety, burnout, or patterns you can't seem to break. But when you turn inward with compassion, something miraculous happens. Integration. You begin to glow differently. People sense it. They feel your presence. You're no longer hiding. You're not pretending. You're real. So now I ask you, what is hiding in your shadow that you've been too afraid to face? Maybe it's unresolved pain, a deep insecurity, or maybe, just maybe, it's a gift you haven't dared to bring into the light, a strength the world is waiting for. Solitude is fertile ground for this work. Away from noise, away from expectation, you finally have the chance to listen, to really listen, to your inner truth. But where do you begin? With observation, not judgment. When painful thoughts arise, don't push them away. Ask, why is this here? What is it showing me? And when the answers come, write them down. Journal without filters. Let the truth flow onto the page. In writing, the unconscious becomes visible. And if what you find is too overwhelming, take it slow. Transformation doesn't happen overnight. It unfolds in layers, in patience, in presence. So here's a deeper thought to carry with you. What if loneliness isn't a temporary season but a sacred practice? What if returning to yourself isn't something you do once, but something you need to do regularly? Think of the mystics, the artists, the thinkers who withdrew not to escape, but to remember who they truly were. You don't have to go to the mountains, just create moments of intentional silence. Close your eyes, breathe, reflect. Ask, what part of me needs to be heard today? Because in that silence, you may just find a strength you never knew was there. There's a strange truth about solitude. It doesn't whisper. It roars. At first, it arrives gently, a pause, a quiet moment. But if you resist it, it grows louder. Suddenly, every thought feels bigger, every fear heavier, and the silence that once felt peaceful now presses against your chest like a weight. Why does this happen? Because when the world becomes still, the self begins to speak. And often, the parts that rise first are the ones we've buried deepest. The regrets, the wounds, the silent truths we hoped would stay quiet. But what if that's the point? What if solitude isn't meant to soothe you, but to shake you awake? Carl Jung believed that when the universe isolates us, it's not punishment, it's preparation. Solitude, he said, is the laboratory of transformation. When you're alone, with no noise to drown you out, you come face to face with the essence of who you really are. But this meeting isn't always easy. Studies show that nearly half of our waking hours are spent distracted, our minds wandering away from the present moment. We escape into screens, small talk, endless tasks. So when we're finally alone, we don't know what to do. The mind, untrained in stillness, begins to panic. We look for exits. But what if there were no exits? What if this moment, the quiet, the emptiness, the discomfort, is the doorway you've been avoiding your entire life? Think of Nikola Tesla. Alone in silence, he imagined inventions that would reshape the world. His solitude wasn't an escape. It was a forge. Or consider the poet who retreats into the wilderness, not to hide, but to remember. Because in that silence, the soul becomes audible again. Still, if misunderstood, solitude can become a trap. When we don't know how to be alone, we fill the void with anything: distractions, noise, unhealthy habits. We reach for instant gratification because we're terrified of the stillness. We've been conditioned from childhood to fear it. Don't be alone, they told us. Go out, be social, stay busy. Society teaches us to define ourselves by our connections, by our roles, by how others see us. But Jung taught us the opposite, that we find our truth not out there, but in here. That inner connection is the source of real meaning. And until we touch that place within us, we're just echoes of other people's expectations. Ask yourself, how many of your choices were made just to avoid being alone? How many times have you said yes to something your soul resisted, just to fill the silence? The paradox is this: when you stop running from loneliness and allow it to exist, a different kind of clarity arises. You begin to see what you really want, not what you've been told to want, not what others expect, but your own true calling. History proves this. Vincent van Gogh, in his letters, wrote about how isolation deepened his understanding of emotion. He used solitude to reach the truest part of himself, and in doing so, gave the world his most honest art. But it's not easy. Loneliness holds up a mirror. It reflects our failures, our fears, our forgotten dreams. And many people, unable to bear that honesty, run. They chase anything that will keep the silence at bay. But silence is a teacher. The more we resist it, the louder the lesson becomes. Unresolved pain, suppressed trauma, hidden desires. If left ignored, they leak into our lives, in relationships, in decisions, even in our health. Studies link emotional repression to insomnia, anxiety, and even heart disease. The body keeps score. So what's the solution? Not escape, not distraction, but presence. Start small. Don't try to fill every moment. Each day, sit with yourself, even just for a few minutes. Let your thoughts rise without judgment. Don't try to fix them. Just witness them. Over time, you'll begin to notice patterns. You'll hear the voice beneath the noise, and in that voice, there is wisdom. There is truth. Because when you become comfortable in your own skin, the need for outside approval begins to fade. You stop seeking validation. You no longer need permission to be who you are. That is true freedom. There's a story of a man named Ellis. Burnt out, disconnected, He retreated to a cabin in the mountains, not to escape, but to reconnect. The first days were unbearable. The silence screamed. But slowly, he began to feel something shift. Ideas flowed. Old pain found understanding. And by the end of that season, he emerged not just rested, but reborn. You don't have to retreat into the mountains, but you do have to retreat into yourself. Small, intentional moments of solitude can change the way you see life. So ask yourself, what is solitude trying to teach you right now? Will you listen, or will you keep running? The truth is, solitude is not the end. It's a new beginning, a sacred invitation to rebuild, to realign, to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. But this transformation only happens when you are brave enough to meet yourself. Because in the silence, when everything else falls away, that's where your soul speaks. And in the next chapter of this journey, we'll explore how embracing solitude and shadow can completely shift how you see yourself, others, and the world around you. Have you ever noticed how something inside you begins to shift after a period of solitude? At first, the silence feels heavy, almost unbearable. But gradually, it transforms into a mirror, reflecting forgotten parts of yourself. In that stillness, something profound is revealed. Loneliness is not the end. It's a portal, a silent doorway into something deeper, more authentic. Carl Gustav Jung taught that when we are stripped of the noise of the outer world, we receive a sacred invitation to reunite with who we truly are beneath the surface. But the question remains, how do we turn isolation into a driving force for a more meaningful life? How do we emerge from this inner journey stronger, more awake, and whole? The answer is simple, yet powerful. Acceptance. Embrace solitude as a vital part of your human experience, not as punishment, but as a sacred call for transformation. Many resist this call, clinging to distractions or waiting for time to heal everything. But the truth is, the only true path forward is through confrontation. Think of nature. The strongest trees are those that have weathered storms. The most fertile soil is that which has been broken and remade. In the same way, the soul blossoms through reflection and renewal. So now, pause and reflect. What has solitude revealed to you? What parts of yourself have risen when the distractions fell away? Perhaps you uncovered fears you had ignored, dreams buried beneath years of expectation, or the real reason why you felt lost. Jung believed that we become whole only when we integrate all parts of ourselves, the light and the shadow. And solitude provides the perfect space for that sacred integration. It forces us to confront our regrets, our doubts, our deepest longings, and ultimately, to embrace them. Let me share with you one last story. Imagine a woman named Helena. She was always surrounded by people, family, friends, endless social engagements, but deep inside, she felt a persistent emptiness. When an unexpected event forced her into seclusion, she spiraled into despair. Nothing seemed to soothe her restless mind. Until one day, in the depth of silence, a revelation surfaced. Her life had been built around what others expected of her, not what she truly wanted. Solitude made her face this truth, and in accepting it, she found the freedom to begin again, this time on her own terms. How often have you caught yourself living a life that isn't truly yours? How many dreams have you buried out of fear of failure or rejection? Solitude offers you a rare opportunity to begin again, free from the pressure of other people's expectations. But let's be honest, it's not easy. There are days when being alone feels suffocating, when every part of you aches for distraction. And that's okay. What matters is what you choose to do in those moments. You can keep running, or you can sit with yourself in truth, in compassion. Because solitude doesn't mean surrendering to a life of isolation. It means learning how to be with yourself, peacefully, patiently, and truthfully. And something magical happens when you finally feel at home within. Your relationships change. You no longer seek connection out of lack, but out of love. Your choices become guided not by fear, but by authenticity. You realize loneliness was never the problem. It was the key. So, what happens next? After embracing solitude, exploring your shadow, and reconnecting with your essence, action must follow. Small, intentional steps that reflect the truth you've uncovered. Maybe it's choosing a different path, expressing yourself more honestly, or simply shifting your priorities toward what truly matters. Every small choice rooted in self-awareness is a victory. And here's the ultimate truth. Loneliness is not a permanent state. It's a sacred passage, a rite of transformation. And if you move through it with courage, you will emerge on the other side, stronger, wiser, more connected to life than ever before. Now, I invite you to take a moment to reflect on your own journey. Share your experience with solitude in the comments below, anonymously, if you wish. What has been your greatest challenge? What has loneliness taught you? Your story could be the light someone else needs. If this message resonated with you, give it a like, subscribe to Psychology of Happiness, and turn on notifications. Together, we are creating a space for deeper reflection, where we can explore the complexities of life and the human soul. And remember, you are not alone. Solitude is not a curse. It is a stage, a sacred teacher, a hidden gift. Embrace it, grow with it, and let it guide you home. Thank you for being here. Until next time.